In this video, we're going to begin our discussion with organizing quantitative data. So, we will discuss a variety of ways to organize quantitative data. At the end of this section, we will begin our discussion on how to determine the distribution of data. So remember, quantitative data is data that provides numerical measures of individuals. So note, when summarizing quantitative data, first determine if the data is discrete or continuous. If the data is discrete with relatively few different values of the variable, then the categories of data, called classes, will be the actual observation values. If the data are discrete, but with many different values of the variable, or if the data is continuous, then the classes must be created using an interval of numbers. So one way to display quantitative data that is discrete is creating a histogram. So a histogram is a graph that uses rectangles for each class of data. Now what makes a histogram different than a bar graph is a histogram does quantitative data, or a bar graph does qualitative data, but the histogram's rectangles will overlap or touch each other, where the bar graph, those rectangles are separate. Okay, let's take a look at an example. So the data below represents the number of televisions in a household. So keep in mind this is going to be discrete, okay, with very, very few data values to select from. It looks like it's going to be in between 0 and 4. So the first thing I want to do is construct a frequency distribution for the data. So I'm going to set up this frequency distribution of the data now. So we have the number of TVs and the frequency. So in this particular frequency distribution, I'm not going to put a column for the tally. We'll just count them up. So let's go from least to greatest. So that's 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right, so let's do the frequency for each. Well, 0, there are 4. For 1, there is also 4. For 2, there are 6. For 3, that looks like there's just 1. And then 4, we've got 5 of them. So there's our frequency distribution. Now we'll use that information to construct a frequency histogram for the data. So I'm going to set up the picture for this now. Okay, so here's the L. I have my title, which is here, number of televisions in a household. I have labeled the horizontal axis as the number of televisions, and the vertical axis, it's a frequency, because it's a frequency histogram. All right, so now the largest number in frequency is 6, so I'm going to go by ones, starting with 0. Okay, so starting with 0, it's 4, so I'm going to put a dot, have it come straight down, go across. So here I will label this on the left-hand side as 0. For 1, I'll put the dot, go straight across, come down, label this as 1. 2 has 6, so I'll put my dot up here, so it'll be extended up, go across, come down, we'll call that 2. 3 only has 1, so we can go across and down, so 3. And then 4 has 5, so I'm going to put a dot here, so I'll have this go up, come across, and down. Now, the very last one is going to be 5. That would be the next particular value here if we had any that had 5 TVs, but clearly that's 0. So here's my frequency histogram for this. Now, you can put frequency histograms into the calculator, but before we do that, there's 6 things I want to write down right now because we're going to have to eventually put these particular data values into the calculator. So I'll put this over here. The X minimum, well, in that case, that's going to be 0. The X maximum. Now here, I want it to be 1 greater than the largest number. Well, the largest number that is in the histogram is 4. I'm going to take 4 plus 1. That's going to be 5. The X scale, we're going from 0 to 1 and 1 to 2 and 2 to 3, so that's going to be 1. The Y minimum I will always have as 0. The Y max, well, take a look at the frequency. The greatest frequency is 6, so I'm going to do 6 plus 1 in this case. That's going to be 7. And the Y scale, I went by 1s with the frequency. So those 6 numbers I'm going to have to eventually put in. So now let's go to the calculator and show you how to put this into the calculator now. Okay, so in order for us to do that, I need to be able to put the data values into the calculator. So how do we do that? Hit Stat, highlight, Edit, hit Enter, and I'm going to go over to L1, and I'm going to type in the data values now. So 1, hit Enter, 0, hit Enter, and put all these data values in. Now remember, we had 20 data values. Notice the very last value here tells me it's the 20th data value, which is equal to 4. Now, once I put the data values in, hit second and Y equal to. Make sure plot 1 is turned on. So here we're going to highlight the histogram picture, which is this. Highlight it, hit Enter. The X list is going to be L1. Frequency is 1, that's fine. So now that this is done, we need to now go to hit the window button, and you remember those 6 values that we talked about, we need to put those in. The X minimum was 0, hit Enter. X max is 5, hit Enter. The X scale is 1, so type that in and hit Enter. The Y minimum was 0, hit Enter. The Y max is 7, hit Enter. And the Y scale is 1. Now we don't need to change anything else here. So now that we've done all this, hit Graph, and there is what our histogram is going to look like. You can hit the Trace button, and you can tell at the bottom here the minimum is 0, max is 1, there's 4 of them. Hit the right arrow, it shows the next one. Hit the right arrow, shows the next one. Right arrow shows the next one, and we can do that for the very last one. Okay, let's take a look at the next example. So when a data set consists of a large number of different discrete data values, or a data set consists of continuous data, we create classes to separate the data. Classes are categories into which data is grouped. Classes should never overlap to avoid confusion on where the data value should be placed. So the lower class limit is the smallest data value within each class. The upper class limit is the largest data value within each class, and the class width is the difference between the lower class limit of 2 consecutive classes. So class width should be equal for all classes. Okay, let's take a look at an example. So the salary and millions of dollars of 31 NFL teams for a specific season are given below. We want to create a frequency histogram with 6 classes. So because they don't give us a whole lot of other information about this, one way to do this is to take the largest data value minus the least or the smallest data value and divide by the number of classes that they're asking you to do. So in this particular case, the greatest data value, 57 and 8/10, the least is 39 and 9/10, and I, in this case, want 6 class limits. Putting that into the calculator, that's approximately 2.98, but we're going to round up to make sure that we can get the greatest value in here. So it's going to be 3. So in this particular case, our class width, I'm going to write this over here, class width equals 3. So let's set up our classes for this. I'm going to start with the least, 39 and 9/10. The class width is 3, so I'm going to add 3 to this number. That gets me 49 and 2/10. That's the next lower class limit. Add 3 again. That's 45 and 9/10. Add another 3. That's 48 and 9/10. Add another 3. That gives me 51 and 9/10. Add another 3. That's 54 and 9/10. Now, let's talk about the upper class limits. Now, again, I can't have it be 42 and 9/10. So I'm going to go 1/10 lower. So that'll be 42 and 8/10 in this case. And the rest of these are easy to be able to determine. All I have to do now is to add the class width, which is 3, to get the next upper class limit. So add 3, that's 45 and 8/10. Add another 3, that's 48 and 8/10. Add another 3, that's 51 and 8/10. Add another 3, that's 54 and 8/10. Add another 3, that's 57 and 8/10. So there are my 6 classes here. Now, similarly to what we did before, we need to figure out the data values in each particular classes. So I'll write this with the frequency. Okay. All right, so let's write out the frequencies now for this. Now I can use this information to create a frequency histogram for this. All right, so I'm going to draw the beginnings of this now. Okay, so I have the beginnings. Here we have a title, Salaries for 31 NFL teams. I've labeled the horizontal axes, that's millions of dollars, and the vertical axes is referred to the frequency, since we want a frequency histogram. So in this case, let's take a look at the least and the greatest frequency. Well, the least is 2, and the greatest frequency value is 11. So I'm going to start with 0 and go by 3s. So it's going to look like this. Okay. Now, let's take a look at the frequency. For the very first frequency, that's 2. So I'm going to put a dot here. And comes straight down, across, and come down. So again, this I will label as 39 and 9/10. The next one has 2 also, so it's the same size, so it goes across and comes down. Now notice the rectangles are touching each other. The next one here is 42 and 9/10. The lower class limit is how I'm going to label these accordingly. The next one is 5, so I'll put a dot here. So that comes straight down, go across and come down. So that's going to be 45 and 9/10. The next one is 6, so I can put a dot here. The next one, that would be 48 and 9/10. The next one is 11, so I'll put that dot about here. So that will come down and go across. So that's 51 and 9/10. And then the very last one is 5, so that'll go about here with the other rectangle, go across, come down. That's going to be 54 and 9/10. And the very last one, if I added another 3, that would be 57 and 9/10. That's what I'll put here. Now, I'm going to put this into the calculator also, but keep in mind I need these 6 particular values. So let's start with the X minimum. Well, that's going to be the first lower class limit. That's going to be 38 and 9/10, or I'm sorry, 39 and 9/10. The X max, remember it's going to be the next lower class limit if I had it, so I circled that. That's 57 and 9/10. The X scale, that's going to be your class width in this case. Well, our class width is 3. The Y minimum will always be 0. The Y max, remember, highest frequency and add 1, so that's going to be 12. And the Y scale, I'll put over here. Well, I went by 3s, so I'm going to put 3. Okay, let's put this into the calculator now. Okay, so first thing we need to do is put the data values into the calculator. So again, we do stat, highlight, edit. Now notice we have the data values from the previous example, so we need to get rid of those. So hit up, make sure it highlights the column, which in this case is L1. Hit the clear button, and then hit enter, and our data values are gone. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in the data values for this now. Okay, now that the data values are in, so again, let's do a quick review. Histogram first, second, y equal to. Again, plot 1 should be on. Make sure it's turned on. Make sure you highlight the appropriate histogram picture. Hit enter. X list is still L1. Frequency is still 1. That's fine. So hit second and mode to get out of here. But now we got to go to window to put our data values in. So remember the 6 values. So for the minimum, it's 39 and 9/10. Hit enter. The max, X max is 57 and 9/10. Hit enter. The X scale, that is, or the class width is 3. So type 3 and hit enter. Y minimum is always 0. The max was 12, and the Y scale is 3. Once you put those 6 data values in, hit graph, and there's your histogram. Remember, the trace button, okay, it shows that I have 2 that's in between 39 and 9/10 and less than 42 and 9/10. The right arrow, the next one has 2. The next one has 5. The next one has 6, 11, and 5, just like we did by hand earlier in this video.